Hi, everyone. My name is Carol Pedersen, and this is the Saxton Virtual Book Club. Today, my guest is Holly Ransom, author of The Leading Edge, and among many other things. Today, Holly and I will be talking for 20 minutes. I won't go into too much about her background and introduction, because that'll take up about 17 minutes, because she is a seriously accomplished person. For example, voted one of Australia's 100 most influential women, nominee for Wired Magazine's Smart List, has interviewed Barack Obama, Malcolm Gladwell, two of my favorite people, Richard Branson. I like him, but not as much as I like Barack Obama. And we're going to talk today about her book, The Leading Edge. Welcome, Holly. Thank you for being with me today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to connect, albeit virtually. Gosh, I can't wait till we're allowed back in the same room as each other again.
I know, exactly. I have read your book, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I'm a big fan of the topic of leadership and its ever-changing qualities and methods. But I think my hardest leadership role so far has been the mother of 3 children, but we can talk about that another time. What I'd love to know, and let your readers know and your aspirational readers know, why did you write The Leading Edge?
Well, thank you for the question. And I'd spent some time over at Harvard doing my Master's of Public Policy. And I wrote this book at the end of the first year of my degree, where I'd spent a lot of time looking at leadership. I was over there to study leadership, think about how we improve it and build it and develop capacity better and differently. And one of the things that struck me overwhelmingly is when I went and did the lit review of sort of the books that were already on the leadership bookshelf, was overwhelmingly that the stories were pretty monodimensional. Like, it was a male perspective from a couple of industries that was kind of held up as the example of what leadership looks like. It was military leader, it was an elite sport coach, it was like a Jack Welch-esque business figure, or as a political leader. And I just thought, geez, leadership is so much more multifaceted than that. We see a lot more diverse individuals practicing leadership, and certainly moving forward, we need to see a lot more diversity in leadership. One of the things that struck me about were 2 things about the books. One was, they lack diversity. And I thought, geez, if this is the way we're telling the story, I wonder a lot of people don't think they're meant to lead, don't think they were born with the capabilities, because we hold up these individuals. And I fundamentally believe leadership is a quality that is developed, or you are made a leader, not born one. So, this whole idea of how do we take people into the jungle gym? What are the habits and capabilities they need to be building? And how do we tell a more diverse story? And I was struck by the fact that the skills that were being written about and the models and methods, as you talked about, they evolve. And yet a lot of the literature felt like it wasn't match fit for 2021, for the pace of change, for the way that we know work is changing, for what culture and high-performing teams look like in this moment in time. And so I wanted to bridge that skill set, but I also want to really intentionally disrupt who we're holding up as examples of leaders. So there's 60 case studies in the book. It's equal gender split. There's 42 different sectors. There's every generation from 30-year-olds to 80-year-olds and everything in between. And so it was a real want to kind of be changing the conversation for the better in that regard.
Fantastic. And do you think that you're starting to accomplish that through the book, or is it too soon to tell?
I think definitely in the reactions I've had from people who've read it so far. So I've been really encouraged. The book's been out for 2 months now. Crazily enough, I think retail's been open in Victoria for 3 days in that period. So I've seen it like once on a bookshelf, but in the audiobook and kind of obviously people being able to order copies. And a lot of people, I think, one thing the pandemic has done is made a lot more people intentional about reading or learning, their own kind of habits, because we've got a routine that we have to shape for ourselves now in a way that previously the routine of sort of, commutes and hours at work used to shape for us in many ways. I think that's definitely part of it. I think the second thing I'm working on at the moment, running a pilot where we've gamified the book and we're turning it into a 28-day challenge to help close what I term the implementation chasm, which is this idea that, we read, we hear ideas really often, we resonate with them, we're inspired by them, but there's still often a follow-through gap, right? Where a lot of the time the rubber still doesn't meet the road. We resonate with an idea, but either the practicality of, yes, but how would I put that into practice? Or the kind of structure and the support of community that can help us have a go and feel safe and like we have a sense of how to experiment with that idea is often quite challenging. So I'm fascinated by gamification. I know it's something I've shared a lot with Saxton's audiences over the year, but I'm now really pioneering new business models and how we think about developing leadership differently, because I think we've got to make it a lot more accessible. I don't think the idea of kind of having, the paywall of sort of being able to having to go off to an INSEAD to do your, executive program for a month that's cost prohibitive, that's network prohibitive, that's time prohibitive. And we need a support structure that when we hear things, at conferences, in leadership programs, that can actually help us take those ideas and bring them into application in our lives. So I'm really excited. We're running a pilot with 100 leaders at the moment. We're going to run a couple more before the end of the year, and then we'll have a number of kind of leadership products out in the market next year. And I'm really excited about what that can do to change the leadership game.
That's so good to hear, because I think that's if I've heard you correctly, that part about executing what you've learned. Because I read everything, and I'm guilty of thinking, oh, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to make that change, and I sort of do it for a little while, and then I get distracted, or I go back to my old ways. So that's critical. Because it is changing so much, leadership, and the people that are entering the workforce or that are young, just beginning their careers, they need a different type of leader that's always been what we considered characteristic. Tell us a story about a leader that you really admire, someone you've worked with that you really admire, and why.
Oh, there's so many I could pick in that regard. And one of the things I'd say about the book is some of the names that you called out, the Malcolm Gladwells, the Obamas, they're featured in it. But I think the thing I'm kind of excited about with the book is that I think people you'll come away talking about are big leaders that you may not know yet. And that their work is incredible, but they, for whatever reason, I think don't have the platform or the profile that they deserve, given what the changes that they're working on and leading. So there's a leader that comes to mind immediately, Jane Chewson, who's a mentor of mine. She's an incredible British Australian. She lives here in Australia now. She founded Comic Relief in the UK, which has raised over $1 billion to do all manner of good work. And she, for me, epitomizes someone who is good at putting herself where lightning strikes and good at putting others where lightning strikes. And that's a phrase I use to sort of describe allowing people to connect in to purpose and passion, or find new passion and purpose. So she's got this great program with her organization, Igniting Change, that she calls Meet the People, Feel the Issues. And she takes people from corporate life, from civil society, from government. I've been out to the youth prison with her. I've gone and met the legal service down in St Kilda that are helping people down there. I've gone and met, social enterprises that are supporting migrant women to find employment and put food on the table for their families. And when you go and you connect with these people and you see the work that they're doing, it inspires you and it makes you want to get involved in a way that reading about it doesn't, that, watching a video even doesn't. And it's this incredible capability I think she's got to make issues real and allow people to connect in with heart and head. And then feel quite transformed in a way where they go, okay, how do I do something? How do I make a difference here? So, and she's an incredible person herself. I mean, she never graduated from high school. She suffered from severe dyslexia, and she took a job as a cleaner at Oxford and got this informal degree, sort of listening at the back of classrooms as she cleaned. And has just gone on over and over again in her life to make the most amazing change. But I think that ability to kind of connect people into passion and purpose, it's such a central leadership idea in this moment in time where we've really moved away from kind of command and control style of leadership. And so this notion of pull leadership, and how do I create an inspiring enough vision that people want to follow? How do I connect people into a cause in a way that makes them want to show up every day and give that effort, that extra mile bit to making our mission become a reality? I think Jane is such a great embodiment of a lot of the values and cultural traits that we need in leaders at this moment in time. So she's one I would definitely put on people's list of people worth reading about and following.
She sounds fascinating. Okay, next question. Sort of a tough one, but can you give us an example of an inadequate leader that you've worked with, and why did they appear inadequate?
Okay, won't know names on this one, but definitely I've worked with and for a few. I've been very lucky on the whole, the bosses I've had. I got great advice when I was a teenager, with a mentor of mine said to me, it's more important the people that you work with and for than the work that you're doing. So I've been actually very intentional through my career around picking based on that lens. And I feel it was a really great piece of advice I was given early. So I've been very fortunate that they've certainly not been the bosses I chose to work for, but obviously you come into interactions with leaders through work, through being inside companies that have all manner of people that are less than desirable. The thing I would say about the one that immediately came to mind when you asked that question was they were an insecure individual. And so the way that they interacted with others was a constant need to assert their authority and their worth because they weren't comfortable in who they were as a person and a leader and in their capabilities. They needed to make themselves comfortable by belittling others and asserting their authority in a way that created a really unhealthy work environment. You know, I would watch members of this team. They were a colleague I interacted with. I didn't directly report into them. It was definitely an example for me of the handful of times in my life where I've been bullied in the workplace, though, in terms of the way that I was just treated and discluded and all manner of things they sort of did to make sure that I didn't feel a part of the team and the culture, and sort of just little ways of chipping away at your confidence. But when I watched the people that directly reported into this leader, you know, they would come into the office when they were sick because they were too afraid to take a day off because this leader never took a day off and always worked when they were sick. They felt they had to answer emails at 5 a.m. and at 10 p.m. and always be on. And I watched these people burn out because this leader, I think, created this unhealthy barrier where, like, it was not only by asserting or comparing herself to others or needing that comparison for validation, but also by this bar of, if I work harder, I'm more valuable. I'm a better leader if I can, you know, put in more hours than anyone else. And I think there's a lot of that is reflective of a manner of leadership that you still see pervading some organizations and industries, certainly that we lionize to a large degree in the industrial age, but is becoming increasingly less common. And in certainly something that we know in a model of a knowledge economy worker where we've got to drive creativity and innovation is just counterproductive. It is countercultural. But that doesn't mean that you don't see it. And I think it's really challenging for some people who got schooled, you know, in styles of leadership where that was the way we work. We work harder. If you clock off before 9, you're not working hard. You know, we're a tough culture and I'm going to ride you hard because that's how my boss rode me, and all those sorts of things that you see. It's really hard to swap to a different way of engaging. But we know now, as I said before, that, you know, you need to create a culture where people feel empowered, where people have autonomy, where people show up because they are working for a why that they connect into, but also, you know, from a business standpoint is bigger than just the bottom line. So that's an example for me of a leadership model that was outdated, and that was certainly really destructive to be working in and for, in my personal experience.
Yeah, I think we've all had a variation of that. I know I have. What do you think are the biggest challenges for today's leaders?
Oof, so many different ways we could take that one. I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I think one is just that shift in the style of leadership. So the fact that we're seeing people now, values matter more, purpose matters more, connection matters more. And so I think for some people that the skills that requires you to build around an orientation towards the way that you tell stories to lead with why, that ability to care about people and to have the EQ to be able to get the pulse read and understand how and when to connect and how different people need to be motivated differently versus this kind of one size fits all that I think you might have historically been the approach.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more people skills involved in this moment in time. And I think that's a great thing. And it's unsurprising that's coming to the fore when we kind of look at what's happening broadly with the technological advancement. If we can standardize something, we can automate it. So when we think about what becomes increasingly valuable in a knowledge economy, it is creativity, it is people skills, it is the ability to motivate, it's the ability to solve problems that, you know, aren't solvable by virtue of pattern recognition and data. So, you know, that's a really interesting one. I think the pace of change is definitely challenging, and the degree to which uncertainty is intertwined with that change is really tricky. So, you know, managing risk, that ability to experiment, iterate, the adaptiveness and the speed to which you can pivot your strategy or your approach as kind of a curveball comes out of somewhere. That's definitely one. And that kind of is intertwined from a people standpoint, because a lot of the space that I find myself dealing with leaders is burnout, is change fatigue, is seriously, we've got to go again. I'm on the final cylinder.
Yeah.
So finding a way to help people, I talk about it in the book, this idea of we need to not be thinking about life as a marathon, because I just don't think that analogy holds for leading and working in the 21st century. It's like a marathon of interval training. Like it's like F45, over and over again. We've got to think about how we create micro breaks and recovery moments, so we can go again, because that idea of sustaining pace and intensity, particularly when we've got uncertainty and the like thrown in, is really challenging. So I think that's one. And I think the third thing is courage. We're at a moment in time where we need to be prepared to throw out the way that we've always done things in a lot of respects and try and experiment with new ways of leading and of working and of solving problems. I mean, the definition of insanity is thinking we can keep doing the same thing over again and get a different result. And there's a lot of courage involved in that, because we were taught and developed, grown up on a model, and this is part of Sir Ken Robinson's work with Schools Killing Creativity, that valued the right answer and that valued knowing. There was certainty, and certainty equaled success. That's not the recipe anymore. We need to be priding ourselves on the quality of the questions that we're asking and our courage to experiment in creating new answers and solutions. And that's a fundamentally different style of leadership to what we saw in sort of the industrial age or the last generation.
Fantastic, which leads me to, I think, probably one of your favorite leaders, which is your grandmother.
Yes.
And in your prologue, you say, I always like to read something from the book. So in the beginning, in the prologue, the very beginning of the book, honey, if you walk past things that aren't right, you tell the world it's okay. So, and then at the end, I would really like to read this. It's a little bit long, but coming back to your grandma, when the dust settled and grandma was ensconced in a hospital bed, I'd call and ask the nurse to prop the phone up to her ear so we could talk. I'm not sure whether it was just the latest musings of her seemingly endless fountain of 89 years of wisdom, or because of all the extra time she had to mull over the state of the world while confined to hospital bed. But our conversations grew even more reflective and philosophical than usual. She shared stories I'd heard before about your dad, World War II, which he encouraged his children with a sense of gratitude and civic responsibility. She told me about working as a nurse with her best friend Ruth during the polio pandemic. She mused a lot about the state of the world. Her confidence made me smile, but given her mediocre assessment of the current state of the world, I couldn't help but inquire why. Why do you feel confident? And her response to you was, because if I've learned anything in my life, it's that people rise to meet the challenges before them. They also rise to the estimations we have of them. What I hope your generation does better than mine is realize the importance of believing in the potential of everyone. Really believing. I think it's the greatest force for good there is in a war between what is and what could be. I think my grandma, as always, just might be right. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you so much, Carol. It was such a pleasure to be with you.